Maid's daughter screamed not to enter the car. The trap was revealed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where nothing seems out of place. The streets were lined with trees, their leaves swaying gently in the breeze. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the city. But for young Lily, a 10-year-old girl who worked as the maid's daughter in one of the wealthiest families in the neighborhood, the world was far from peaceful. Lily was small for her age, her clothes worn from years of use, her shoes barely hanging together. She was used to being invisible, part of the backdrop in a house where wealth and power were in abundance, but kindness was scarce. She spent most of her time doing menial chores, cleaning the floors and helping her mother, who worked tirelessly to keep the mansion spotless. Despite her quiet demeanor, there was something sharp about Lily, something people didn't notice, but something that would prove to be her greatest strength. One afternoon, as she was finishing her chores, she noticed a black car parked outside. The car was sleek and expensive, with tinted windows that blocked any view of the inside. She didn't think much of it at first. It was just another visitor to the mansion, probably one of her employer's rich friends or a business associate. But then, something strange happened. A man stepped out of the car, dressed in an expensive suit and wearing sunglasses, even though the day was already fading into evening. He glanced over at Lily and smiled. The smile didn't seem warm, but rather calculating. He nodded to her and then walked toward the front door, his footsteps echoing in the still air. That was when Lily's instincts kicked in. She felt something was wrong. She had seen the man before, in passing, but she never interacted with him. She wasn't supposed to, she was just a maid's daughter after all. But something about the way he looked at her sent a shiver down her spine. It was as if he was sizing her up, assessing her like she was a pawn in some larger game. She turned her attention back to the car, watching as the man entered the mansion. A feeling of unease settled in her stomach. Then, as she was about to go back inside, she heard a voice, a soft, almost inaudible whisper. "Don't get in the car." Lily froze. It wasn't her mother's voice. It wasn't anyone she knew. It was a voice that seemed to come from nowhere, yet it rang in her ears as clear as day. She turned around in a panic, but no one was there. The voice had come from the shadows of the mansion's courtyard, and it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. She stood still for a moment, her heart racing, unsure of what to do. She knew she had to be careful, but her curiosity got the better of her. She crept closer to the car, her small footsteps barely making a sound on the gravel driveway. She peered inside, but the windows were too dark to see anything. Still, something about the car didn't sit right with her. As she stood there, a sense of danger loomed over her, like a shadow that wouldn't let go. She turned around and made her way back to the front door, her mind racing with questions. What was that voice? Who had spoken to her? And why did the man seem so familiar? Lily had no answers, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let the mystery of the car go unsolved. She had to find out the truth. Little did she know, the trap was already set, and she had just stepped right into it. I had no idea how to explain the feeling that was gnawing at me. It was as if the world had shifted, and I was suddenly part of something much bigger than I could comprehend. The voice had been so clear, so certain, and the warning so direct. "Don't get in the car." My heart pounded as I stepped cautiously back into the shadows, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. The man in the expensive suit was still inside the mansion, and though I couldn't see him, I felt his presence like a heavy weight hanging over me. I stayed hidden for a few more moments, watching the front door. The distant hum of voices could be heard, muffled by the thick walls, and I could see a sliver of light spill from an open window. But I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. I had to do something. I had to find out what was going on. I crept back toward the mansion, careful not to make a sound. My heart raced with every step, but I told myself to stay calm. I had to be smart. The whole place felt different now, suspicious, like there was a secret I wasn't supposed to know. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. As I reached the door, I paused, peering inside. The scene was eerily calm. There were no signs of struggle, no shouts or arguments. Just a quiet conversation between the man in the suit and someone else. I couldn't make out their words, but I could see their movements, their body language. The man was speaking in a low voice, too quiet for me to hear, but his face was stern, almost angry. The other person in the room was a man I recognized. It was Mr. Thorne, the patriarch of the family, one of the richest men in the area. He was sitting in a plush armchair, leaning forward as the man in the suit gestured toward him, clearly trying to make a point. My curiosity gnawed at me, but I knew I couldn't get too close. I had to stay out of sight. I waited, watching for any sign of a clue. It wasn't until the man in the suit turned abruptly, heading for the door, that I realized I had made a critical mistake. I had been too focused on the conversation and not enough on my surroundings. The door creaked open, and I froze, my heart nearly stopping. The last thing I wanted was for him to see me. I backed away quickly, but it was too late. His eyes caught mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of surprise. He didn't expect me to be there. His gaze shifted, cold and calculating, before he nodded slightly and continued walking. He didn't speak, but the message was clear. He knew I had seen something. I turned quickly, my mind racing. Should I run? Should I tell someone? I couldn't go back to the car, that much was certain. I needed to find my mother and get out of here before it was too late. But just as I was about to make my move, I heard another voice. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a command. "Lily, come here," it said, low and firm. It was Mr. Thorne's voice. I hesitated, standing frozen in the hallway, unsure of what to do. Was this part of the trap? Was he inviting me into the danger? But there was no way to avoid it now. I had already seen too much. Slowly, I walked toward the sound of his voice. As I entered the room, Mr. Thorne was sitting at his desk, his expression unreadable. He looked up at me with those piercing eyes, and I felt the weight of his gaze. He didn't say anything at first. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but cold. "You're not supposed to be here, Lily. You've seen something you shouldn't have. And now, you're going to help me fix it." I stepped forward slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. Every step toward Mr. Thorne felt heavier, like I was walking deeper into a trap I didn't fully understand. He was sitting at his large, mahogany desk, staring at me with a look that made my skin crawl. His eyes were cold, calculating, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. I had no idea what he was planning, but I knew it wasn't good. As I stood there, waiting for him to speak, my mind raced. What had I seen? What had I heard? And why was he asking me to help him fix something? My gut told me that something wasn't right. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. I had walked into something much bigger than myself. Mr. Thorne finally broke the silence, his voice calm, but with an edge of authority. "You know too much now, Lily. You saw me with him, the man in the suit. You overheard us talking. You're going to help me, whether you like it or not." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to run, but I knew. I couldn't. Not yet. I was trapped in a mansion with a man who had too much power. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving me. "I need you to keep quiet. I need you to act like nothing happened. The man you saw was an associate of mine, and we were having a private conversation. You weren't supposed to hear it. But now that you have, I need your help to clean up the mess." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Clean up the mess? What mess was he talking about? I could tell he was hiding something, but I didn't know what. "And if I don't help?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Mr. Thorne's expression didn't change, but I could see the faintest flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "If you don't help, Lily, I will make sure your life here becomes impossible. You and your mother won't last another week." His words were sharp, cold, and they sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to argue, to fight back, but I knew I didn't have the power to do that. He was right. He controlled everything. I was just a maid's daughter, and I had no leverage. "What do you want me to do?" I repeated, this time with more resignation in my voice. Mr. Thorne gave a small nod, satisfied with my response. "You're going to act like everything is normal. You'll go back to your chores, you'll stay out of the way, and you'll pretend like nothing happened. You'll never speak of the man in the suit, or of what you overheard. If you do, I will make sure that no one believes you. Do you understand?" I nodded slowly, my heart sinking. I hated myself for it, but I had no choice. I had to play along. For now. As I turned to leave the room, I felt a strange sensation, like I was walking away from the truth. The truth about the man in the suit. The truth about what Mr. Thorne was hiding. But I couldn't stay and ask more questions. I was too afraid of what might happen if I did. I had to be careful. I had to watch my back. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to stay quiet forever. I would find out what was going on, and when I did, I was going to make sure the truth came out, no matter the cost. I had done what Mr. Thorne asked. I stayed quiet. I went back to my chores, and I acted like nothing had happened. But the more I tried to pretend everything was normal, the more I felt like something was about to explode. Every time I walked past the rooms in the mansion, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking past a secret that was too big to ignore. I felt trapped, like I was living in a lie, and yet I had no choice but to keep playing along. I didn't dare confront Mr. Thorne again. His warning echoed in my head. If I spoke out, if I exposed what I knew, my mother and I would be out of here with nothing. I had to be careful. One wrong move, and it could be the end for both of us. But then, something happened that I couldn't ignore. Late one evening, after the last of the staff had left for the day, I was walking through the kitchen when I overheard a conversation. The voices were low, hushed, but I could hear the tension in their words. It was Mr. Thorne again, speaking with the man in the suit, the same man I had seen earlier. I moved closer, trying to stay out of sight, my heart pounding. I had to know what they were talking about. You don't understand, the man in the suit said. The deal is already in motion. It's too late to stop it now. And what about the girl? Mr. Thorne's voice was colder than I had ever heard it. The maid's daughter? The man in the suit hesitated, as if he wasn't sure what to say. We'll deal with her when the time comes. She won't get in our way. No one will. I froze. My heart stopped. What were they planning? Why did they need to deal with me? The man in the suit's words hit me like a slap, and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was in deeper than I realized. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was part of something I didn't understand, something dangerous. I had to get out of there. I had to warn my mother. But before I could make a move, I heard footsteps approaching, heavy and fast. I stepped back into the shadows, holding my breath. The door to the kitchen opened, and Mr. Thorne appeared, his eyes scanning the room. I held my position, trying to be as still as possible. I wasn't sure if he knew I had overheard him, but I didn't want to find out. He walked past me, his footsteps echoing in the silence. When he was out of sight, I exhaled, feeling the tension leave my body. But it didn't last long. I knew now that I couldn't keep quiet anymore. Whatever they were planning, whatever they were trying to do, I couldn't just sit by and let it happen. I had to figure out the truth. I had to stop them before it was too late. That night, I lay awake in my small room, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I had heard. The words of the man in the suit echoed in my mind. We'll deal with her when the time comes. What did they mean by that? What were they planning for me? I didn't know, but I was going to find out. No matter what it took. I couldn't sleep that night. The man in the suit's words kept echoing in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I had always known that the life I lived in this mansion was a far cry from what most people would consider normal, but now, I was part of something that I didn't understand. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to do something. I couldn't just wait for whatever plan Mr. Thorne and the man in the suit had for me to unfold. I had to act. The next morning, I decided to follow them. I didn't know what I would find, but I couldn't ignore the growing sense of urgency. My mother was busy cleaning the mansion, so I told her I was going to the park. It was a lie, but I couldn't let her get involved. She had enough on her plate. I slipped out of the house unnoticed, feeling the weight of what I was about to do settle heavily on my shoulders. I walked through the quiet streets, my heart racing with every step. The mansion's gates seemed a mile away, and every car that passed by made me nervous. I had to make sure I wasn't being followed. Finally, I reached the park, but instead of sitting down, I kept my eyes on the street. I didn't know where Mr. Thorne and the man in the suit had gone, but I knew they couldn't hide forever. Hours passed, and I started to lose hope. Maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe I had misunderstood the whole situation. But then, just as the sun began to set, I saw them. Mr. Thorne and the man in the suit stepped out of a black car and into a building across the street. It was an old, run-down place that didn't look like much, but I could feel something wasn't right. They looked around before entering, making sure no one was watching. I knew I had to follow them, but I had to be careful. I waited for a few minutes, letting them get far enough ahead so I wouldn't be noticed. Then, I crossed the street, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath before slipping into the building after them. The door was heavy and creaked when I pushed it open, but it was too late to turn back. I had come this far, and I had to know the truth. The inside of the building was dark, with only a few flickering lights illuminating the hallway. I moved silently, careful not to make a sound. I could hear voices ahead, low and muffled, but I couldn't make out the words. I crept closer, keeping my distance, when I finally caught sight of them again. Mr. Thorne and the man in the suit were standing in front of a door at the end of the hall. The man in the suit was talking to someone inside, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. Then, the door opened slightly, and I saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. She handed something to the man in the suit, who slipped it into his jacket pocket. My mind was racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Who was she? Why was Mr. Thorne involved in this? What was in that envelope? I had to find out. But just as I was about to move closer, I heard footsteps behind me. I froze, panic rising in my chest. Someone was coming. I couldn't get caught now. I had to act fast. I ducked into the nearest room and held my breath, hoping they wouldn't see me. I waited there in silence, the seconds feeling like hours, until the footsteps faded away. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I couldn't give up. I had to know what was in that envelope, and I wasn't going to stop until I did. I waited, holding my breath, hoping the footsteps would fade away, but they lingered. My heart was racing, my palms sweaty, and my mind was spinning with questions. Who were these people? What was Mr. Thorne involved in? And what was in that envelope? I couldn't afford to make a mistake now. I waited for a few more moments, listening carefully. The silence returned, and I slowly exhaled, trying to steady my nerves. I had to find a way to get closer, to uncover the truth. I carefully moved out of the room and crept back down the hallway. The flickering lights cast long shadows on the walls, but I kept my focus on the door ahead where I had seen Mr. Thorne and the man in the suit. The woman was gone now, but I could still hear faint voices coming from the other side. They were too far away for me to make out, but I knew I couldn't wait much longer. I had to act. As I neared the door, I took a deep breath and pushed it open just enough to peek inside. I could see Mr. Thorne standing at a desk, his back to me, and the man in the suit was sitting across from him. They were speaking in hushed tones, but the words still didn't make sense. I couldn't hear clearly enough. Frustration began to bubble up inside me. I needed to get closer. There was no way I could make sense of this from the hallway. I took another step forward, my shoes barely making a sound on the old wooden floor. I was almost there when suddenly, the door creaked. My stomach dropped, and I froze, panic flooding my veins. I had been too careless. The door had betrayed me. I held my breath, praying they hadn't heard. A moment passed, then another. The silence felt like it stretched on forever. But then, to my surprise, I heard Mr. Thorne's voice, louder now. "Someone's here," he said, his tone cold and sharp. My heart stopped. I didn't know if he meant me, but I wasn't about to find out. I darted back into the shadows, ducking into a small storage room on the side. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to stay as still as possible. Every sound seemed amplified. The soft hum of the lights, the distant rustle of papers, the sound of my own breathing. I held my breath again, waiting, listening. The footsteps grew louder, and I could feel the tension in the air. Someone was coming. I couldn't let them find me. Not now. Not when I was so close. My eyes darted around the storage room, looking for a way out, but there was nothing. The only escape was through the hallway, and the only way out of that was to face the man who had just spoken. I had no choice. Slowly, carefully, I stepped toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and opened it just a crack. I peered into the hallway, but it was empty. The coast was clear. For now, I slipped out of the room and crept back down the hall, my footsteps as silent as possible. The voices were still talking, but I was no longer focused on them. I needed to get to that room. I needed to see what was inside that envelope. Without thinking, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. This time, I wasn't going to be stopped. I had come this far. I had to know the truth. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. The room was dimly lit, filled with stacks of papers and old furniture that had been left behind. It smelled of dust and stale air. I tiptoed inside, trying not to make a sound. The voices I had been hearing earlier were gone now, replaced by an eerie silence that only added to the tension in the air. I glanced around, looking for the envelope I had seen earlier. There it was, lying on the desk, just within reach. I felt a rush of anticipation as I approached it. The only sound in the room was the soft creak of my footsteps on the wooden floor. I reached the desk and looked at the envelope. It was plain, with no markings, no indication of what it contained. But I knew it was important. I could feel it in my gut. With trembling hands, I picked it up. My fingers brushed the paper, and I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should just leave it alone. But there was no turning back now. I had already come this far. I opened the envelope carefully, trying not to make a noise. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I unfolded it slowly, my eyes scanning the words. It was a contract, but not just any contract. This one had names on it. Names I recognized. Mr. Thorne's name was at the top, but the other names, those were the ones that made my blood run cold. They were connected to a secret deal, one that involved more than just money. It was about power. It was about control. The deal was set to go through in just a few days. I could hardly believe what I was reading. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. What had I gotten myself into? How was I supposed to stop this? I stood there, staring at the paper, feeling like the walls were closing in around me. The truth was worse than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about some business deal. It was about something much darker. They were planning something illegal, something dangerous, and I was somehow caught in the middle of it. Just as I was trying to process everything, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching. I froze, panic rising in my chest. I had to get out of there. I couldn't be caught with this. I quickly shoved the paper back into the envelope, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get it closed. The door creaked open, and I froze again, heart pounding in my ears. I knew who it was before I even saw him. It was Mr. Thorne. He was standing in the doorway, his eyes locked on me. There was no hiding now. He had caught me, and I knew there was no way out of this. I had seen too much, and now I had no choice but to face the consequences. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that this was only the beginning. The trap had been set, and I had just walked right into it. I stood frozen, the envelope clutched tightly in my hands, as Mr. Thorne's piercing eyes bore into me. His presence filled the room, heavy with tension, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I could hear the faint beating of my heart in my ears, and I knew I had to act fast. But what could I do? The man who held all the power, the man who had already threatened my family, was standing right in front of me. His gaze never wavered, and I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but laced with danger. "You shouldn't have come here, Lily," he said, his words like ice. "You've seen too much. You know too much." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as I struggled to find my voice. "I don't understand," I whispered, though deep down, I knew exactly what was happening. He had been playing me all along. I had walked into his trap, and now I was stuck. "You don't have to understand," he replied, stepping closer. "What you need to do is keep quiet. Keep your mouth shut, and everything will be fine. But if you try to tell anyone, if you even think about speaking out, I will make sure you regret it." His words were chilling, and for a brief moment, I thought I might faint. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself to stay standing. I couldn't let him see my fear. "What's in the envelope?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "None of your concern," he said, his voice tight with irritation. "It's better for you if you forget everything you've seen today. Go back to your chores. Pretend like nothing ever happened." I felt a surge of anger rise within me. He thought he could control me, silence me with threats. But I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not after everything I had seen, everything I had overheard. I had to do something. I had to get the truth out. "I'm not going to." "Forget," I said, my voice shaking but determined. "I will tell someone. I will stop you." For a moment, he just stared at me, as if weighing his options. Then, without warning, he stepped forward, his face inches from mine. "You're not in a position to make threats, Lily," he said, his breath cold against my skin. "You're just a little girl, and I can make your life a living hell if I want to." I could feel the fear creeping back into my chest, but I forced myself to stand my ground. I wasn't backing down. "You think I'm just a little girl?" I asked, my voice rising. "You think I'm powerless? Well, I'm not. And I won't stop until I expose you for what you really are. His face twisted into a look of amusement, but there was a hint of something darker in his eyes. You have no idea what you're up against, he said, backing away. But we'll see how long your courage lasts. He turned and walked toward the door, pausing just before leaving. Remember, Lily, he said with a cold smile. You're nothing. Don't forget that. And with that, he was gone. I stood there in the empty room, the weight of his words still pressing on me. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the same girl who had walked into that room a few hours ago. I wasn't just a maid's daughter anymore. I was someone who was willing to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. I wasn't going to let him win. Not now. Not ever. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was racing, my body still charged with adrenaline from the encounter with Mr. Thorne. The weight of his words echoed in my ears, but more than that, the anger I felt fueled something inside me that I couldn't ignore. He thought he could silence me, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I knew now that I had no choice but to act. It wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about stopping whatever plan they were putting into motion, something that could harm others and change my life forever. The next morning, I decided I would take the truth into my own hands. I couldn't rely on anyone else. My mother didn't need to get involved. I couldn't risk putting her in danger. But I had to find someone who could help. The problem was, who could I trust? I knew too well that the people in this mansion, including Mr. Thorne, were powerful, manipulative, and would do anything to keep their secrets hidden. It wasn't just a family business. It was a network of connections that stretched far beyond this place. I was on my own. I had to take action, and I had to do it quickly. I waited until dusk, when the house was quiet, and the workers were finishing their tasks. My mother was in the kitchen, unaware of my plans. I gathered everything I needed: the envelope, the contract, the evidence. I didn't have much, but it was enough to get started. I slipped out of the house once again, moving quickly but carefully. I had one destination in mind: the police station. I had to make sure someone heard me, someone who could protect us. As I walked through the dark streets, I thought about the enormity of what I was about to do. I was risking everything: my safety, my future, even my relationship with my mother. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. I reached the station just before closing time. The officer behind the desk looked at me with a raised eyebrow, his expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Can I help you, kid?" he asked. "I need to speak with someone," I said, my voice steady but firm. "It's about something serious. A crime." The officer studied me for a moment, then motioned for me to follow him into a small office. I handed him the envelope. "I've seen something dangerous. I need to tell you what's going on." He opened the envelope, flipping through the papers inside. As he read, his expression shifted from casual curiosity to concern. "Where did you get this?" he asked, looking at me sharply. "I've been working for Mr. Thorne's family. I overheard a conversation. They're planning something illegal, and I think it involves more than just money. They're after power," I said, my voice gaining strength with each word. "I can't stay quiet about this anymore. I need you to investigate." The officer looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We'll look into it," he said, setting the papers aside. "But you need to stay safe. I'm going to make sure someone keeps an eye on you." I felt a rush of relief. For the first time in days, I felt like I had a chance to make a difference. I wasn't alone anymore. As I left the station, the weight of what I had just done began to sink in. I had taken the first step, but there was still more to be done. I couldn't stop now. I had to keep pushing forward, no matter what came next. The truth had to come out, and I would make sure it did, no matter the cost.